Hi class, welcome to Chapter 2, Traditional Health Beliefs and Practices. So this chapter is important. However, a lot of this chapter looks at this topic from a health practitioner point of view, meaning you're somebody trying to treat a patient. Maybe you're a doctor or a nurse or a physical therapist or a social worker or a dietitian or a psychiatrist or psychologist. And so while I like some of the core concepts from this chapter, I don't think it 100% applies to food and culture because it's really looking at health and culture versus specifically food. And so I will cover this chapter, and I will try to focus on what I do want you to know, but I may not cover it in 100% detail. Again, you can fill in from your book. But as far as the chapters of the book goes, this is not one of the most important chapters of the book. All right, so we'll get started. So, cultural outlook, worldview. So each cultural group has a unique outlook on life based on common understanding and ranking of value. And different cultures have different perceptions, and sometimes these agree with other cultures and sometimes they don't. We're going to look at American culture and compare it to other cultures. For example, in American culture, we're very task-oriented and we like to participate in our healthcare. We might be Googling, symptoms of our disease or looking up side effects of medications before we even go to the doctor. We might have a whole bunch of questions we want to ask. We might even self-diagnose and self-treat. Other cultures prefer to put their trust in the doctor and will just show up at the doctor's office and whatever the doctor tells them goes. So depending on the culture, you might have different responses to healthcare treatment. This is especially evident in the circumstances of life and death. For example, Asians believe in reincarnation, and so they often don't try to go to heroic lengths to preserve life because they believe in an afterlife. Jews, Orthodox Jews, believe in preserving life. Non-Orthodox Jews believe in ending suffering. And so even within one religious group, you could have differences in what people want for the end of their life. And again, you're probably thinking, what does this have to do with food and culture? It does not have to do with food, but it definitely has to do with culture. And understanding that each culture is different and diverse might help you understand which foods that they eat, which foods that they perceive as powerful or curing or beneficial or even harmful. This chart compares American culture to other cultural groups as far as some of our main kind of practices or beliefs. So for example, we are future-oriented, other cultures are past or present-oriented. We focus on our youth, other cultures focus on elders. In the United States, we do believe all humans are equal. Other cultures have hierarchy or ranking systems. Biomedical worldview. So what does this mean? Biomedicine is a subdivision of the American worldview. And so this is a specific way of kind of treating, diagnosing, and dealing with illness or a belief. Problems sometimes happen when Americans try to impose their biomedical worldview on other cultures. Remember that I said America a melting pot. Well, America is a melting pot, and it's made up of people from all different ethnicities, religious backgrounds. However, in general, health practitioners, the majority of them are Caucasian or white. And so cultural imposition occurs when this very kind of similar, all white healthcare professional tries to impose their beliefs on a very diverse range of people. And I'm not saying all health professionals are white, but in the United States, the majority of them are, compared to the ethnicities, religious groups, cultural groups they are treating. In The American kind of view of medical treatment, we believe in numbers, we believe in diagnostics, we believe in technology. We think health can be measured, based on your labs and your x-rays and your MRIs. And this can be a quite different view of health from other cultures. Biomedicine, so personal control or fate. Like I said, biomedicine is very focused on diagnostics, labs, interventions, etc. By giving somebody like a medication or a prescription. And so it doesn't leave a lot of room for chance or divine intervention. It's very science-based. And this could pose a problem for an ethnic group or cultural group or religious group who does put a lot of faith in chance or divine intervention. What if, they're sick and they have cancer and they say, God will take care of me, or I know God has a plan for me. Well, that is very true for their ethnic group or religious group, but it doesn't necessarily always agree with conventional US medicine. And so sometimes conflicts can occur. There is an American assumption that if somebody is sick, they will seek out treatment, and if they comply with the treatment, they will be cured. This American assumption is not necessarily the same for other cultures or other countries. So, for example, it's an assumption that you will get vaccinated, and if you get vaccinated, your immunizations, you will not get tetanus, for example. The flu is a little bit more controversial, but tetanus, for example. It's an assumption that we will brush our teeth. If we brush our teeth, we won't get cavities. It's an assumption that if we go to the doctor, he gives us antibiotics, we will take them and get better. So those are kind of assumptions that we make in the United States. In the United States, we do believe everyone has an equal right to health care, but this does not happen. For example, people who are in poverty, perhaps don't have insurance, maybe only have emergency insurance or Medi-Cal, may have health coverage, but it may be at a different kind of quality compared to others. Biomedicine continued. So the Americans are very focused on youth versus elders. And because of this, we are afraid of getting old. And there's actually $1 billion supplement industry just for anti-aging supplements and remedies to try to postpone aging. This is different than some other cultures. Other cultures really respect their elders, look forward to aging, look forward to the wisdom that comes with age, and don't try to do anything to postpone it or postpone the way they look. Formality and time perceptions. So, for example, when you go to a doctor, it's expected that you are there on time or maybe early. However, if that doctor runs 15, 20, 30, 40 minutes late, even hours late, that's considered okay. Also, it's expected that you address that doctor as doctor, but that doctor may address you as Joe or Jack or Mary or your first name. So there's different kind of formal expectations between different cultures. Health. So what is health? Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, not merely an absence or disease or infirmity. And that's according to the World Health Organization. But I do believe there is quite a bit missing from this definition. So, for example, this definition leaves out spiritual health. It leaves out supernatural health. It leaves out natural health. It leaves out emotional health. And those are things that might be very important to different cultures or religious groups. And so even though this comes from the World Health Organization, it might exclude some cultures. Cultures treat pain and symptoms of sickness differently. For example, in some cultures, it is okay to, complain or make your voice heard when you feel pain or you feel sick. And in other cultures, it's actually looked down upon. I find this specifically to men a lot. So many cultures don't believe that men should complain of injuries or complain of pain or even go to the doctor if they feel sick. They should just kind of, man it up and get over it. And this is especially true for many Hispanic cultures. this, may serve some purpose within their culture. That would be something I'd have to learn more to understand, but it can also be kind of dangerous. I had a patient whose son had testicular tumor growth and pain, and he didn't say anything about it, didn't say anything about it, didn't say anything about it. And finally it became so big that he couldn't wear his pants anymore. And so he had to say something about it. And when they took him in, he had testicular cancer that had spread, and he ended up passing away just because he had not said anything about this. Can we look at a person and assume good health? Yes and no. You can look at this person right here, she's kind of yellowish, orangish, her eyes look yellow. To me, this does not look healthy. And we can look at people, maybe they have nice skin, nice hair, well-kept nails, no bruises, no bleeding, nice teeth. And maybe we would assume that they're healthy, but that doesn't always tell us what's happening on the inside. Cultural definitions. So there are norms within family, marriage, and community that might be a sign of well-being. Body image is one thing that we do look at for cultural kind of ideas about health. And different cultures find that different body sizes are healthy and desirable. In America, we generally think thin is better. I think this is shifting a little bit to strong is better, and I like that shift. But other countries actually think that having a little extra weight or bigger is better. Traditionally, somebody who was thin was sick and didn't have enough money for food and was, fragile and ill. But now this is something that we want to look like. Also, traditionally, somebody who was bigger was affluent and maybe had servants or didn't have to work. And so that used to be desirable. And so these body image kind of ideals can change between cultures and time and location. These are some examples of different bodies from all over the world. And, you might look at some of them and think, oh yeah, they look healthy, they look great. Or you might look at some of them and think, no, they don't look healthy, they don't look great. Or you might look at some and think, oh, that this is what they're supposed to look like. This is representing their culture. So it just shows some kind of very diverse ideals and perceptions about body image. Agreements on health. So what are some international agreements on what makes one healthy? It is agreed upon that if one has good diet, sufficient rest, and is clean, they have good health. However, how we define good diet, sufficient rest, and cleanliness varies a lot between cultures. So what is good diet? What is sufficient rest? What is cleanliness? That can vary a lot between cultures. In this chapter, I'm just going to focus on good diet because this is about food. But if you want to read more about cleanliness and rest, you can. Generally speaking, Americans think 3 meals a day is good. Are you getting enough to eat? Asians may think a balance of yin and yang is good. They may be concerned about religious purity of food. Certain people might be concerned about, is it organic or non-GMO? And so good diet can kind of be up to interpretation. Promoting food habits. So foods are necessary for many of our things and, many important things to life: strength, mental acuity, equilibrium, and balance and moderation is important. In the United States, our recommendations for balance and moderation are currently summarized under My Plate. And we're going to explore through this chapter and other chapters recommendations for balance and moderation. Some examples in other cultures are yin and yang and hot and cold. So balancing yin foods with yang foods and balancing hot foods with cold foods. This is an example of yin and yang. And in Chinese culture, it is very important to balance yin foods with yang foods. I think a picture should be there. Oh, sorry. Yin foods represent things that are soothing. They're generally raw. They're cooked at lower temperatures. They might be light in color. Yang foods are spicier. They're cooked at high heat. They might be brighter color. And then rice is kind of the staple that balances them all. So in opposition, or kind of in an alternative to my plate that we're using in the US, Chinese very much value balance between yin and yang foods. So you would have the right amount of yin foods, the right amount of yang foods, and then rice as your staple. Other cultures might look at hot and cold foods. And hot and cold foods may have to do with the origin of the food, may have to do with the body, may have to do with how the food is cooked, how it tastes, or how close the food is to the sun. So I'm not going to ask you these specifics, but I do want you to know that some cultures believe in hot and cold foods. For example, in Lebanon, they believe that the body has to adjust to a hot food before they can eat cold food. And in Mexico, the categorization of hot and cold is related to the food's relationship to the world. This is just an example of some foods that might be cold versus hot, as well as neutral. And so, according to this, it would be important to balance the hot foods and the cold foods, and also have some neutral foods. If you were out of balance, that would be considered bad for your health. Some cultures categorize foods based on their qualities. So, example, we may have foods that can bring us strength. And I listed some examples that are very typical, and you may have heard of, chicken soup for a cold or when you're sick. Eggnog to improve vitality. One of my students contributed menudo for a hangover, things like that. Foods that have sympathetic qualities. So foods that have sympathetic qualities may look like a human body part or organ and may have an effect on a human body part or organ. For example, red wine is supposed to look like the blood and have beneficial effects on the blood. Gelatin is supposed to strengthen the nails. Ginseng, this is actually ginseng right here, and it may look like the human body or a finger, and so it's supposed to be good for our bodies and improve strength and stamina. Cabbage, this one is a little bit more difficult for me to wrap my head around, but cabbage is supposed to look like a tumor, and so if you eat cabbage, it's supposed to help with cancer. And then oatmeal and fish are supposed to be good for your heart, and I'm not going to just say it's supposed to, but they are good for your heart. How we perceive sickness and illness vary between cultures, as well as what is done about sickness and illness. So illness is caused by weakness, pain, discomfort, physical debilitation, and illness would potentially prevent somebody from, doing their normal contribution to society. It's caused by a disease, and it may be their perceptions to and reactions of a condition. Disease is abnormalities or malfunctionings of the body and the organs, and sickness is the combination of both. So sickness includes the disease as well as the illness. There are different kind of cultural reactions to the sick person, as well as cultural expectations if you are the sick person. So if you are the sick person, do you tell people that you're sick? Do you tell your family members or your coworkers? Do you say, wow, I'm really sniffly, I'm coughing a lot, I have a sore throat, to get affirmation that, in fact, yes, you are really sick? If it's been confirmed that you're sick by other family members, are you then excused from daily responsibilities? If you're sick, are you going to expect somebody to take care of you? Or are you from a culture where it's expected that you take care of yourself? So these are all things that vary between different cultural groups. How do we explain sickness? This also varies between different cultural groups. And depending on how sickness is explained or understood, it can really affect what a cultural group would seek from a treatment. And so this is why it would be important for a healthcare practitioner to really understand many different cultures, because if they can understand different cultures, they can understand what they think caused the symptoms and the sickness and how they might be most effective of treating it. So for example, there may be immediate, underlying, or ultimate causes of the disease, and there may be separate causes for the illness. So immediate cause of the disease, maybe this is a virus or a toxin or a tumor or an injury. Underlying causes, maybe high cholesterol, nutritional deficiencies, high fat diet, smoking. Maybe you smoked and you got the tumor. Ultimate causes, maybe you had a hereditary disposition to get disease. Maybe there was environmental stress. Maybe it was obesity. And then you could also look at causes of illness. So from the patient, the natural world, the social world, etc. So, did somebody curse you? Did you upset somebody? Were the winds out of line? Have you been bad? Have you been, lying to people, etc.? Sickness caused by a person. So if sickness is caused by a person, it could be for a couple of reasons. Maybe they have a genetic inheritance for it. Maybe they're susceptible to it. Maybe they've made some bad lifestyle choices, crazy activities, doing drugs, unprotected sex, eating fast foods, drinking, not exercising, texting and driving, etc. And usually the responsibility for sicknesses that are believed to be due to the person fall on the person. Sickness is due to the natural world. So what kinds of faults can we blame on the natural world? Maybe we can blame the weather, smoke, pollution, bad air. I know recently there were fires in Central California and the air was really bad and people were getting sick. So we could blame those sicknesses on the natural world. Maybe astrology, did the planets align correctly or incorrectly? And were you kind of sick because of that? Maybe lightning, maybe floods, maybe hurricanes. Sickness is due to the social world. So did you have a conflict with somebody, whether it was, a personal relationship or within the community? Did you upset an elder or somebody important in the community? Many cultures believe in the evil eye. And the evil eye is kind of a stare that somebody can cast upon you to kind of project evilness. And this can cause sickness. So if somebody looks at you the wrong way, it can cause sickness. Children are susceptible to the evil eye. And so many cultures cover up their children with blankets over their cribs or buggies or strollers. Or some cultures actually will let their children be dirtier, will not cut their hair, will not put them in clean clothes to reduce the chance that somebody's going to look at them because they're going to make them uglier and less susceptible to the evil eye. There is a video to watch about the evil eye, and I do recommend that you watch it. I will ask you something about it. Some strategies that people have used to prevent the evil eye. They've painted the house blue and white so that it blends in with the sky. I already mentioned not washing their children, making their children unattractive. And then they can tie a string around their wrist or put a bag of herbs in a crib. Conjury. So conjurers obtain their power from the devil, and they can manipulate the supernatural world to cause illness. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Illness due to the supernatural world. So many cultures believe that illness could be due to the supernatural world. And so therefore, if you're working with a culture like this, you need to be aware of it. So for example, if somebody has diabetes and they believe that this is due to the actions of the god, the spirit, or the ghosts of the past, it may be more difficult for you to try to convince them that they need to check their blood sugar, that they need to eat differently, because perhaps they believe this was their fate, or they couldn't do anything about this. Folk illnesses. So this is something talked about in your book, and there are different types of folk illnesses. Generally speaking, a folk illness is kind of a grouping of symptoms, complaints, and behaviors that are associated with a certain condition or illness. And so there's one folk illness called muso, there's a folk illness called suns, there's a folk illness that can cause stress, anger, or fright. And then there are diet-related folk illnesses. So even things like anorexia and bulimia are actually considered folk illnesses. Healing. So we talked a little bit about biomedicine already, and we did talk about how biomedicine is kind of missing this emotional, spiritual part. And so there is a difference between healing and biomedicine. Biomedicine is looking at the numbers, the labs, and then prescribing a drug or an intervention. Healing is looking at the person, their family life, their social issues, their emotional health, etc. And so you can heal somebody even if they haven't been diagnosed with a disease. You can't treat somebody if they haven't been diagnosed with a disease. You can't use biomedicine if there's no diagnosis, but you can still use healing. And many cultures believe in using both. Depending on your belief, you might choose biomedicine or healing. And like I said, you may choose both. About a third of Americans with chronic disease do choose a combination of the two. Unconventional therapies, these might also be called maybe alternative therapies or complementary therapies, and they actually could include anything like over-the-counter medications, herbal supplements, dietary supplements, diet meals, things like that. And we'll talk about some of them coming up. Chiropractic, physical therapy, acupuncture, etc. So, administration of therapeutic substances. This can actually include diet prescriptions and pharmaceutical drugs. It could include herbal remedies, could include animal or plant parts. Many cultures will grind up the bones of animals or use the marrow of animals in treatments. Chinese traditional medicine has been around for thousands and thousands of years and traditionally uses herbs as treatments and may include homeopathy. Homeopathy believes in a concept of like cures like, and they will prescribe things to help the body heal itself. Application of physical forces. So these are considered, non-traditional treatments, and many of you may have tried some of these before: chiropractic, osteopathy, massage therapy, acupuncture, etc. And I'm not going to spend too much time here on this chapter because I really want to spend more time on actually talking about food and culture. Additional types of therapies: pinching or scratching, coining. Coining is rubbing a coin or a spoon on the body. Electricity, often used in sports medicine. You can have electrodes attached to you either via acupuncture needles or via little sticky pads, and this can stimulate muscle twitching. Cupping, you use suction cups to try to restore balance in certain spots of the body. And I have actually had this done. I had a massage therapist who was very into it, and she said, "Hey, why don't I try this on you?" And I said, "Sure, try it once, why not?" And I liked it. It made me look like I got hickeys by an octopus. I had welts all over my back, but I think that it maybe helped. So there's all sorts of different therapies out there. Many of the therapies are based on putting pressure points or doing acupuncture to certain spots around the meridians. And this is just a picture of the meridians and how you can apply pressure to these spots, and it would lead to different organs in the body. Religious interventions, magico-religious interventions. So maybe some spiritual healing interventions. You may take this upon yourself, or maybe you're going to contact a healer to help heal you. Maybe you believe that God is going to be involved. Maybe you're going to use a shaman, a magician, a priest, a doctor, etc. There might be chanting, prayer, Native American shamans. They can communicate directly with God, and they believe that sickness is due to spiritual crisis. Medical pluralism. So medical pluralism is the use of multiple healthcare systems. And so what this is talking about is maybe you're going to use biomedicine, but you're also going to use other things. Maybe you're going to use healing. Maybe you're going to use acupuncture. Maybe you're going to use massage. Maybe you're going to use meditation. Maybe you're going to use yoga. Maybe you're going to use an herbal supplement. And so this is people's individual choice. And a lot of cultures do combine most of these things. A client is going to feel most secure when they're talking to a provider who is aware of their cultural beliefs. And so that's kind of what I was saying about cultural competency being important to relay health information. This also goes to diet information. And so this is kind of maybe how I can relate some of this chapter to diet and nutrition. I eat I would say I eat kind of a Mediterranean type diet, even though I don't live in the Mediterranean. But there are many cultural diets that are not common to me and are not necessarily part of my everyday menu. And so when I'm working with clients from cultures that are different than mine, I need to educate myself about what foods are important to them, foods that wouldn't be common to them, foods that just don't really fit into their culture, foods that aren't available in their culture, in order for them to feel safe with me. Because if they talk to me about diet and they think I'm just going to tell them to eat exactly what I eat, that doesn't necessarily work well. So this is kind of how I apply some of the principles from this chapter to my own practice. Really, this chapter is trying to explain that every culture is so different, and the more you can understand, be open-minded, and accept the differences, the better communication you're going to have with people from other cultures besides your own. All right, I know that was a little bit abbreviated, but I will spend more time on the chapters that relate specifically to food and culture more. So I hope you enjoyed and maybe got a lot out of chapter 2, and I'll talk to you soon.